Great, thanks, Brandon. Yes, so my name is Justin Harderson, and I'm with the LivePlan team here at Palo Alto Software in Eugene, Oregon. And today's session is the financial picture, and the key takeaways that you're all going to receive today is just the elements of a financial picture, the importance of forecasting, particularly right now, and really I'm going to hone in on some best practices. So there's 5 or so best practices that I'm really going to focus on. So those are going to be the key takeaways from this session, and then I'll show you a tool that you're all actually going to get access to that can make some of these things easier if you want to use it. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. All right, so the agenda, so I went over most of these items. So financial picture, what's in there, why is forecasting important, go over those forecasting best practices, and then I'm going to hop into a real forecast from a fictional business to kind of show you how some of these things actually work and what this would look like. And then I will highlight a couple helpful resources that can help you do this work as well. And then we'll open it up for the discussion.
Justin, your screen is not shared, just so you know.
Okay, let's try this again here. Okay, perfect. All right, so go back. So there's the agenda I just talked through, and the financial picture. So what are the components of a financial picture? So the first component are the accounting actuals. So those are, what happened yesterday and where are we at today. And then we have the forecast, so our forward-looking financial projections. And that can be the most difficult part of this financial picture to really think about because, it's a little murky. It's in the future. We're making assumptions and guesses. So I'm really going to focus in on that today. And again, those best practices should hopefully help you do this effectively. And then the last part is benchmark. So that's comparing, how does our business look in terms of some of these financial metrics compared to other similar businesses in our industry. So some of the characteristics for actuals, again, we're looking backwards. So where are we at today? Where were we at yesterday, a month ago, a quarter ago, last year? And these tend to be detailed, right? Because we have all the details, and so we can be detailed with our actuals. They're accurate, so we know what happened. There's no guesses, and they're static, so that doesn't change. Comparing that to the forecast, so now we're looking forward, right? And since we're doing that, we want to be more strategic with our forecast. So we really don't need to be quite so detailed as we would be with our accounting. And these are all assumptions. They're educated guesses, and the key word there is educated. So these are guesses, but with our forecast, we are using all the information that we have available today, and we're incorporating that information into our financial guesses and our projections. It's dynamic, so unlike the actuals, this is going to change. Once you do a forecast, it's not set in stone. It should be something that you're coming back to and updating on a regular basis, and it can be aspirational. So this really gives you the opportunity to paint a financial picture to where you want to go and then follow that like a roadmap. The last part of this is benchmarks. So helping you understand how your business compares to other businesses in terms of some of these key financial metrics. And I've listed just some good sources of benchmarks here. So Profit Sense is what we use in LivePlan when we pull in our benchmark data. IBISWorld is also a really good source to use for industry data. And these services require subscriptions. And so if you want to have, try to find access to industry benchmarks without having to purchase reports, your local SBDC sometimes will have access to these resources that you can use for free. And then sometimes your local library too will have access to some industry benchmarks. So those are good places to look to get those numbers to do some comparisons. But you are all going to receive access to LivePlan, and that'll give you some benchmark data as well that you can use if you want to. All right, so why forecast? So forecasting is always important, but particularly now because a lot of business owners kind of do this type of forecasting work intuitively in your head as you're running your business. It's always good to put it on paper, to have something written down, but especially when things change and it's not business as usual, it can be super, super helpful. So I'll just kind of read this here. So, having that financial roadmap to follow reduces uncertainty, and it helps you make informed decisions and take directed action. So I've kind of highlighted the two key words there. Right now you're making lots of different decisions about your business, and they're consequential decisions, and you're needing to take a lot of action at the same time. And so you want to make sure that as you're making those decisions, that you have the data that you need to make sure that they're good decisions financially for your business, and that the action you're taking is directed, and it's taking you to where you want to go as you're managing and operating your business. And so this is just a quote that we like to use here. So this is from Dwight Eisenhower. So plans are useless, but planning is essential. And in this case, I don't know that plans are useless necessarily. It can be helpful to have a forecast. If a bank wants to look at your projections, it's good to have that document to give them. But really, the key to this is that it's the activity of planning that's essential. So if you could, wake up tomorrow and have 5 different forecast scenarios to follow, that's great. But really going through the process of making those financial projections and thinking about where you want to go and how that translates into the numbers, that planning work is really what is going to help you be successful in doing this. And planning also, is an action-oriented word. So again, it's showing something you should be doing on a regular basis. And the last point to this, to really emphasize how this can help right now, is that time, the more time you have, the more options you have, right? And one of the keys to doing this forecasting work is to pay attention to your cash flow. And the sooner that you can identify that there might be some tight times and see that in your plan, the more options you have. But the closer to that event you get, your options are limited. So really, this process of looking at the future and paying attention to your cash flow and doing these projections can help you identify any potential issues sooner, which is good. All right, so these are the best practices that I really wanted to focus on today. The first one is get started with your best guess. And this is all kind of, focused on just helping you get something down, a financial model that's written, and really emphasizing that it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, it's not set in stone once you have something written down. So the key is just getting a model that you can come back to and improve as you go. So getting started is really, that first step. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just use your best guess now and you can update it later. The second part here is don't duplicate your accounting. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you want to keep your forecast lean and strategic. So, if your accounting has, 50 different revenue line items that you're tracking for your business, you don't want to replicate all 50 of those in your forecast. You want to find a way to consolidate a lot of the line items in your account, that you might have in your accounting software. And your plan should be much more simple, and it really doesn't need that much detail. So we have the tendency to want to hold on to all those details, but really if you have a much more simple forecast that you actually use and update, it's going to do you a lot more good than a super detailed forecast that's so confusing you never want to look at it again. So that's something to think about, but also strategic. So as you're collapsing those categories, you want to make sure that it's still representing the information that you need to make those decisions for your business. All right, so you want to make sure that your forecast also includes both profits and cash. So you want to be able to see when you can, get back to being profitable or get back to being as profitable maybe as you were before the crisis. And but the key thing here is looking at your cash. So you want a forecast that includes not just a profit and loss statement, but also shows you what your cash position is. And then creating multiple forecast scenarios. So the next slide, I'll show you what some of those scenarios might be and talk through that once we get into the actual forecast here. but by laying out different scenarios, it makes it easier to get started, first of all, because you know, oh, I can make a forecast, and then if I want to tweak some numbers and change some things, I can just make a new scenario, and I'm not going to goof up what I did in my original forecast. And this allows you to reduce some of that uncertainty, so you can think through some different possible futures that you might experience and know, okay, how are those going to affect my numbers? So as you go into the future and you see kind of where things might be going, you have a few different paths that you've thought through and laid out that you can follow in terms of your forecast. And the last part here is reviewing, comparing with your actuals, and updating often. So this goes back to that planning as a verb. And normally we would say for a business who's doing this, you might want to, every time you close out your books for the month, you might want to go back to your forecast and make those updates. Our company is doing this on a weekly basis, and we started doing that in late March when everything kind of shut down. And the reason is because things were changing so quickly and still are changing so quickly. We want to make sure that our projections are reflecting that. So we're actually doing this on a weekly basis for now, which is what I would recommend as the best practice as we kind of go into this recovery mode here. All right, so some useful scenarios. As you're thinking about multiple scenarios, like what are some key ones that can really be helpful? So this is something that we did as soon as everything shut down. So we made these basically 4 different scenarios. So one is our original forecast. So that would be, if you're starting doing this today, that's your original forecast, right? So all the best guesses you have, go ahead and think about what might happen in the future, and that can be kind of like a best guess forecast. A working forecast is, whoops, let me go back. A working forecast is just that same thing. So take that original forecast and just make a copy so that you have that original forecast saved, so that you know how things were looking when you first made this, but have a working forecast, and that's the one that you're updating on a regular basis. So the working forecast is your evolving picture of all the information that you have today incorporated in there. So you're making updates, on a weekly basis, ideally. Growth forecast is also good to have. So that's, hey, best case scenario sort of thing. This is where, I saw this represented in someone's forecast as the "I'm going to buy a boat" forecast, which I thought was awesome, and that really spoke to me. But this is your growth scenario. So hey, if we open up this new revenue stream, this is definitely where you would want to put that NASA contract, right? That might be your "I'm going to buy a boat" scenario in your LivePlan forecast, and that's aspirational, and that's something that you can share with the team. Say, hey, if we all get together, if we do these things and execute on this growth strategy that we laid out, here's how things could look, and that's your aspirational forecast. And then a worst case scenario. For our company, our original forecast is our worst case scenario. So we made that when things were looking the worst. And so we had an understanding of, okay, if this trend continues for a long time, then what does that look like? What do we need to do? And so that's really, hey, what do we absolutely need to operate and still be in business? So that way, kind of what that worst case scenario could look like for your business. So with that, let me hop into the software here, and I'll emphasize as I'm doing this. So there's lots of different tools that you can use to do forecast. There's tons of templates online, cash flow templates. A lot of those are going to be Excel based, and so if you're somebody who isn't super savvy with Excel, or you just don't like working in spreadsheets a lot, this type of more of a guided software tool can be helpful. And again, you'll all get access to this. So if you want to use LivePlan in this way, you can certainly do that. Okay, so getting started here. So I want to focus on those best practices that I talked about, and actually just kind of show what those look like. So as we're looking at this bike shop, the first step is kind of getting started, or the first best practice rather, is getting started with your best guess. And so we've done that, right? We have this financial model here, this bike shop owner. The second step is keep it lean and strategic. So you can see here for this bike shop, there's only 6 different categories that this bike shop owner is managing. So if you went into Garrett's, he was the bike shop owner. If you went into his QuickBooks, he might have a lot more categories for new bikes, for example. So the different brands that he sells, maybe kids bikes versus adult bikes. But in this forecast, he collapsed those into one category. So that's just an example that you can think about as you start to consolidate those line items. But really think about your business. You know, what information do you need to make good decisions and still keep that that forecast nice and strategic? All right, and so you know the one best practice that I wanted to talk about as well is doing these scenarios. So in this case, you know, we've gone through, we've built our bike shop forecast here, and LivePlan actually lets you just kind of copy this scenario and make a new one. And so just as an example, let's copy this existing forecast. And one of the ones that I talked about is our best case scenario. So we can put that in here, or that would be our growth scenario, or the I'm going to buy a boat scenario. So we can go ahead and set that up. And basically from here, now we still have our original forecast that we made, so that's saved. Now we want to go in and actually adjust our assumptions. And so you can go into your revenue streams and say, hey, well, what if we're really able to turn the ship around and you know, bring our sales back up to maybe where they were before, and you can start applying some growth percentages here and kind of boost these numbers up and show, hey, what happens if we're able to kind of right the ship and bring things back to where they were, where we hope they can be. And that way you can show your team, you can show your leadership, hey, if we're doing things the right way, we're executing on our different growth strategies, here's how things could look. And you can also add new revenue streams here. So again, that NASA contract, we can plug in here. And think about, hey, when do we think this, you know, that revenue would start coming in? You know, what kind of revenue stream is it? And we can add that to our forecast so that it's represented. I'm just going to put a bunch of zeros. I assume that's a good contract from NASA there. And you can choose kind of when we think that might happen. And so that might change as time goes on. You get more information, you can go in there and tweak those numbers. But here we can see, you know, now we have our growth scenario where we're thinking about, you know, different streams of revenue that we can bring in for the business and what that means for a financial picture. And so, you know, whatever forecasting tool you're using, you should be able to kind of save those different snapshots and keep those to follow. And then I also do want to touch on the benchmarks while we're in here. So this is where we can compare our business to other up and running businesses. So these are some of the things that you might want to think about. So margins, you know, how does your business compare to similar businesses in your industry? Cash metrics are really important. So if you can, you know, if you've noticed that you tend to pay your invoices a lot quicker than what's standard for your industry, maybe you can call up your vendors and negotiate some better terms that help to give you better cash flow. And then same things with your accounts payable. If you can negotiate longer terms as well, that's good. And then, you know, looking at how much percentage of your revenue you're spending on rent and marketing and payroll can really help you understand kind of what your strengths are, what your areas for improvement are, and maybe give you some good information as you're having conversations with your vendors and suppliers. And the last part I'll touch on here is the dashboard. So this just kind of highlights, you know, what it looks like to do a plan versus actual comparison over time. So LivePlan makes it, you know, pretty easy to visualize this. Again, if you're using Excel, you can just kind of look at those numbers and overlay them from numbers you get from your bookkeeper, from your accounting software. But this is, you know, being able to look at it in these terms and understand, you know, here's kind of your financial picture right here. So where are we at today? How does that compare with where we thought we were going to be at today? And then how does that compare with, you know, where we were last month and where we were at the same time last year? So all of those data points can give you a really clear, good financial picture that can help you make decisions and really understand how things are going for your business. All right, so with that, we're just at about 20 minutes here. So I'm going to share these couple other resources. So if you do end up using the LivePlan account that will be sent to you, We also have a free content website called bplans.com. And here there are like more downloadable tools that you can use. There's all sorts of free resources here. And it's just B as in businessplans.com. And if you actually click on this banner here, the first section, it's going to take you to our COVID-19 resources page. And here there are lots of webinars, more articles, things like that. But if you are using LivePlan to do this forecasting and your cash flow projections, our CEO actually has a couple great webinars in here that are recorded that you can watch. And she does a deep dive into doing this. And she's doing it in LivePlan, but you can really apply what she's teaching also to other spreadsheets and things like that too. And so this is a good resource. Again, if you just go to that bplans.com page and click on that first banner, it'll take you to this page where there's some more helpful resources to help you kind of navigate and do this work. That's pretty much it. So I'll open it up for a discussion from here.
Great. Thanks so much, Justin.